voice friends. Welcome to another episode of Interviews on Voice Matters. My name is Liz Johnson, and today I have Chris Johnson here, and I mostly wanted to talk with him because we share a last name. Just
that's the only qualification I need.
No, I wanted to talk with Chris because he is one half of the co-founders of the Naked Vocalist, and I know most of my voice friends know who you guys are and listen to your podcast. So if you haven't heard of the Naked Vocalist, you're going to have to go check it out after this. It's a wealth of information and interviews and wonderful things about voice. Very exciting and very entertaining and wonderful. So there's that. And I must mention Steve Giles is the other half of the Naked Vocalist too. And he can't be here with us, but that's okay. Maybe we'll get to interview him at some other point in time.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I also want to say Chris is a vocal coach and a singing voice teacher. And I want to talk about the distinction in those two things in a little while, but he is both of those. And he is also a teacher trainer with vocology and practice, as well as a member of the Pan American Vocology Association, and a very well-known and heralded a voice professional in general, and also very absolutely worldwide at this point. How many downloads you guys have? Like 240,000 plus or something like that? Like just
well, that's like last time I checked, which is about 6 weeks ago, maybe a little longer. So it's kind of it just keeps galloping. It shocks me every time.
It's amazing. So first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And second of all, thank you so much for your great work and your enthusiasm and just sharing all this great information with the world. I think it's amazing. And I know you do it because you love it, or at least I hope you do it because you love it. And the rest of us are benefiting just so much. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I do love it. I just, everything about it for me is highly enjoyable. And don't get me wrong, like there are other benefits that other people might hold slightly higher than the act of doing podcasting itself, but not me. I'll take it all, thanks. All of the pleasure, all of the love, and some of the cash if it's coming. It's not coming. But, but again, it's not why we do it.
No, it's not. And, I want to just jump in and talk about the Naked Vocalist to get to it so people don't have to listen for 10 minutes until we get to that point of it. Like, how did you guys start the Naked Vocalist?
Well, it's, we've been friends for a long time. So, the kind of meandering through teenage years at school, which is, God, we met like 26 years ago or something, like a long time ago at school. So we kind of meandered through school. We knew each other then in sports teams, came out of school, lost touch a bit, ended up in a choir, ended up setting up a band from that choir. And just what kind of happened was we kind of just spent a lot of time on the road, in a van, driving to gigs. And we were both voice training with techniques at the time. So we would sit in the van and go, man, I tried this thing yesterday, totally blew it. Like I ruined it on stage. Be something like, I don't know, low larynx or something, like just messing around with these voice concepts that we were learning at the time. And we have a lot of discussion because we're both quite passionate like that. We love the gig environment, the performance environment, and then the artistry. And then on these road trips, we used to listen to podcasts anyway, but we were both like majorly into fitness at that point as well. So we were like gym buddies, spotting partners, whatnot. And so, totally. I mean, we spent a lot of time together. It's like in the gym, live together and gig together for 5 years or something like that, right? So
the podcast had to be born, right?
Yeah. And we listened to this guy called Ben Coomber, who was a fitness podcaster, and it was so raw. It was like laptop, no mic, a couple of people around it. Someone was probably on Skype. There was lag. He didn't have an intro or anything. It was so raw, but we loved it because actually what he would say would be relevant, and it was fun, and he was cool. And then one day, I think it might have been Steve said, I reckon we could probably do this. We could probably give this a crack in singing. And then obviously I'm there going, yeah, this sounds like a great thing. So then we started to plan it, and that's when that led to recording a pilot 4 times, and it's still not that good. but you just have to put stuff out and get better, and you can't just erase the past, or you listen back and go, I'll do all that again. But there's no point. You just move on and use it as learning experience in this industry, because nothing, well, unless you're going to go out and do a course, not a lot is going to prepare you for it. You just got to learn.
Yeah. So how'd you guys come up with the name The Naked Vocalist?
That was actually thrown out by my ex-girlfriend. So yeah, we had a meeting, but that was like, you know, my girlfriend at the time threw in a few ideas to the pot.
Yeah.
And then we ended up choosing that. But kind of, we spoke about the concept of the name, and it just had to be quite, you know, the naked part of Naked Vocalist is just trying to strip back all the tosh and all the fluffy woo-woo and whatnot, and just like, let's just get stuff out there for what it is, and expose it. Like, let's not wrap it up or put it behind a paywall, or let's just get honest truth out there and get it from sources which we present, or guests which we have coming on, who are also on that same vibe, I think, where they're, you know, trying to do something really good, really honest, and really accessible in the singing world, which is it, and it's not been that way for so long, which is why I think that's why we did it.
Yeah, I can 100% relate. That's why I want to do this series too. It's just to share information with people that otherwise have access to it, and it's easy to do now with technology, right? Why not just give it a shot? You know, anything we do to add to the information and the sharing is great. I think it's wonderful.
Completely.
Yeah. So how many episodes are you guys up to now, published?
53, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 50. Sorry, 56 we're up to at the moment. There's also quite a lot of blog posts on the website as well, where there's some guest authors that come on. Still got those coming on. So they actually get a lot of traffic from the internet. So the people that listens to the podcast, they might not visit the website. So we get these figures, and we see like the listens via apps and via Spotify and everything like that. And then you get the true visitors to the blog posts. And yeah, the blog is, you know, as popular as the podcast, if not more. Yeah. And that's kind of just the way different people like to consume information is the big discovery and all that.
That's what I love about it too. It's a really impressive repository of different perspectives and viewpoints from your guests on the podcast, but then also the writers on your blog. I highly recommend people just like, you know, spend, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 10 hours just kind of perusing information there, because there's a lot.
There's a lot, and it's just about to get bigger as well. I've got about another 6, 7 really good posts and podcasts to go up soon.
That's great. We have a lot to look forward to for sure. So, just kind of backing up a little bit, what got you into singing in the first place?
Oh, well, I don't remember the initial spark, but I just remember these sort of vivid memories of it's actually the thing I remember most is mirror singing, right? Is looking at myself in the mirror, and my MJ Michael, he was my initial hero. His singing was so emotive, and what sticks with me is this little tape of Off the Wall album, which I think was like 79 or something. My mum had that tape, and I just pillaged it. I think I made a copy of it at some point when I was like 4, or someone made me a copy when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I would just listen to that, and then there was Thriller, and then whatnot. But I used to just mime his stuff in the mirror, and the feedback I got was, obviously I was listening to his voice, and at that age I don't know what lyrics mean for a start, so it's not like they have that much meaning to me. But it's the sound of his voice, and it's the emotional information that you get from just his vocal tone. And even when I got older, I didn't know what he was saying, because his diction was mental, right? I don't even know what he said. But that tone, oh my goodness, like there's just nothing better for me than his vocal tone. And it just pierced my heart, and it would come out in my mimes in the mirror. And then those mimes became like dance moves, and I'd watch Moonwalker, and then I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could dance. And so I just have this long memory of that. And then it got to my teen years when I ended up going to a youth club where I was really into like neo soul. So everyone on my school bus was listening to hardcore dance, right, which was the cool music in the 90s.
Yeah.
For the youth. But then there's me at the back listening to like Maxwell or something. And even like I've had my earphones pinched off me by the idiots that at the back. Just kind of going, what are you listening to? What is this crap? You know? And I'm just like, well, I like it. I don't care what you think. So when I was listening to that, I went to a youth club where you were allowed to put on your own music. And so it was my turn. I had 30 minutes of my own turn in the pool hall, right? So I put my music on, and then there was this girl in there who was like, I really love these tunes. And I was singing along a bit, and then she was like, I have a voice coach. So she wrote down the number on a piece of paper with pencil. I was like 13. And I put that in a drawer, and I didn't find that again until I was 15. And then I looked at it in the drawer, and I was like, oh, hang on a minute. That rings a bell. My memory was ticking. Whose number is this again? I was hoping it was, like a lovely, lovely lady. It wasn't. It was an old man, an old bald man. So I ended up ringing him up, and that was it. That was the start of my singing career, because he got behind me a lot. He was really encouraging of what I did, and he brought me into his choir. He gave me lead vocals. His son-in-law in the end ended up taking on me as a client, and also pushed me forward into this market. And it's in that choir where I met Steve again, regained like, oh, there you are. I haven't seen you for 4 years. Let's start a band. That became professional. And then it just starts going out in this whole chain of events. So that's kind of where my career began.
How about your teaching career? How did that weave into it?
Well, that kind of came because we were singing kind of semi-professionally, if you like. So doing pretty good gigs on the Friday, Saturday, Sundays, but I was still going to work in the week at a day job. And that day job was one of the victims of the financial crisis. So back in early 2007, I got made redundant within 24 hours of any news of any kind of financial crisis going on. So I was like, I remember sitting watching the news that night going, oh, that sounds rough, about the American mortgage crisis. I got to work the next day and had my notice. And my notice was a day. So it was like, here's a box. I was like, cool, okay, this is tricky. And so the way it kind of panned out was the whole world went into disarray at that point. And so me getting a job in this tiny little town was just no go. I couldn't get a job, certainly not in my industry. And so I had to take this thing that I had singing and just go, well, I better do a bit more of this then. And fortunately, it was enough to pay the rent and feed me at the time. But I had to put a lot of work in. So I had to use that last little edge of credit card to go, right, I need a couple of bits and bobs to carry me through. And I started singing more regularly, but then my voice started to really feel it, because I was, as much as I took singing lessons, they weren't technical lessons. They had different content, but nothing that's going to keep me 3, 4, 5 nights a week, right? So voice started to go downhill, and I had to find someone who could help me. So in the end, I traveled to London. And started taking lessons with someone in specific technique, which kind of changed my world a bit. And in the end, it allowed me to fulfill this new thing that was amazing passion for me. But obviously, if you've just lost your job and you've got no income, then you go and do this thing you're passionate about, but you're really scared about it too. And then that starts to go south. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Right.
This is a tough time. So I was panicking, and I've always known I've worked well under pressure. from the fact that I always failed at coursework and did great in exams, right? So it's like, put me under the thumb screws and I'll be fine. So all of this kind of pressure on me, it did lead me somewhat to panic learn how to sing again. However, it was that redundancy and that issue leading to what it led to, which is learning technique, is probably out of the most panicky time in my life, is the most fruitful thing to have happened to me, which is a professional music career and a high interest in how the voice works. So naturally, the teacher who taught me said you should consider teaching, because it's another good part of income, and you seem to get it. You understand the technique. And so I went in flailing into voice teaching for the next few years. And as all voice teachers know, unless you're lucky or have amazing guidance hour by hour, you spend 4 years just kind of not knowing what you're doing. So it takes a little while to enjoy that too. You know, when you can feel a little bit more secure, because I'm like, okay, I feel good about this now, but I've taken a while to figure it out.
So when you started those voice lessons in London, was that your first introduction to voice science, or did that come later?
Yeah, well, that was my first introduction to larynx, vocal folds, vowels, those kind of, you know,
those scary things.
I guess primary adjustments that you could make. Yeah. And obviously, because I had no experience with that in the past, if you focus on those things, I know in pedagogically now, you wouldn't necessarily look at those things straight away or only. However, if you haven't trained before and you look at just those things, you're gonna get somewhere. You're gonna feel something very different, and it's going to allow you to change your viewpoint and take another path. So that's as far as the voice science went for me at that point, but it was way enough to change my behavior.
Yeah.
And that behavior became exciting. And then those road journeys that me and Steve were on, as he was also taking lessons at the same time, they became really exciting then, because then it's like, oh my God, I tried that thing and that thing really works. I was so happy. And so it kind of goes on like that. So yeah, it's when you've got somebody next to you in the car to talk to it about, it actually perpetuates the passion for it, rather than being on your own a lot, which I think voice teaching is, as it's put out there, that can be quite a lonely profession. So can being a singer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's why I like doing these interviews and or talking to colleagues such as yourself, just because you're in your own little private studio all day long, every day, just kind of hammering it out and stuff out. And it really does. I look forward to a day where we have more and more avenues of connection and communication, so you can openly say, hey, what do you do to get, deal with this problem? Hey, what do you do over here? And I think there's still a lot of people that, it's scary to talk about what you do, because sometimes you don't understand why something works, Yeah,
well, yeah, I mean, the forums just tell us that, right? That, evidence-based can only go so far, because it's very hard to research certain parts of voice. So it's like, hey, I don't have any evidence. I just have an amazing amount of punts in a row that paid off. And so I'm going to trust it as much as I can. Right. So, there is that. But then there's also, when communicating ideas to someone else, you feel like you have to put in so many caveats and so many but and if and blah. It's actually quite hard to communicate ideas in that sense, because you don't want to put someone on a bum steer. So I think that type of communication is so much best done speaking rather than typing, and ideally working on a singer and being able to demonstrate what might happen here and what might happen there, and whatever. So yeah, the communication of those ideas, I think at some point we'll be able to do that better, but at the moment it gets difficult.
Yeah, and mostly because we don't have a common language. Don't you find that you have to like re-explain or find out what somebody knows and see what that means to you, so that you can talk about a concept with somebody?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you read enough resources, I guess like you can get quite far with it, understanding what someone's talking about. And I've found that the podcast, especially because it's across 56 episodes or whatever, it's opened my mind to so many different ways of training. That opens up avenues of research for me, where I'd read then so many different things about that, and whether that be holistic type stuff, postural type stuff, acoustic science type stuff. And when you kind of go around like that, what I'm quite thankful to the podcast for is it's broadened my knowledge enough so that when I do train teachers, which is quite frequently, I feel like I can do just that little bit better in interpreting what someone's trying to tell me or ask me.
Yeah.
And so I'm really thankful for that, because then it's like, okay, yeah, maybe we can come at it from this angle and this angle. But without that, I think I would still be trying to drag them into my perspective.
Yeah.
And come at it from there, which is fair enough if that's where you're at. But I think to really spread yourself a bit more open like that is gives you an enhanced ability to communicate.
Yeah, and a couple of things I'm hearing you say are there's an inherent curiosity that drives what you do, like just being curious about other people's perspectives and curious about getting more information. Would you say that that's a pretty important quality that we need to have as voice teachers?
Yeah, I think so. And many people are curious, aren't they?
Very.
But I think many people might struggle with knowing where to start. Some people just want to know what's good or not. And again, we probably have to get away from that argument as well, right? Because it's like, I guess everything's, even shouting is good in some ways, right? Because at least some people, in terms of primal sound, can harness that. It's just knowing how to work with it is the key, and knowing where it's going to come a cropper or not. So yeah, I think lots of people are curious. They may be struggling for that sort of info, or like voice teachers, like you just struggle with time and energy, because at the end of the day, I speak to so many voice teachers, and I was the same. It's like 30, 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
I don't think people in other industries, especially industries where you're not interacting one-on-one for that amount of time, I don't think that those people may quite understand how much energy is required to deliver one-on-one lessons for 10 hours a day, every day. Any job is hard 10 hours a day. I mean, people would normally puff their cheeks out and go, blimey, that's a lot of hours, but 10 hours teaching is a lot of energy. And most people just want to crawl up and sort of in a hole for 2 days. Saturday and Sunday, just put me in a hole. I'll get back out again Monday when my brain has managed to absorb all of this kind of like energy and all of that chat and all of that worry that you get from your clients. So when singing teachers are able to give themselves a bit more space mentally and in their diary, I think that curiosity and integration of new techniques will happen better. But until someone does that, it's just gonna be difficult.
So you're advocating for balance then?
Completely. And I've done that. I mean, I'm not at Nirvana, let's say that, right now. But I have made moves with the advice of other teachers and people in business. I have made moves to make my work and my life serve the things that I find important. And recently it's been more so family, since I had a baby girl 10 weeks ago. So that was important to me. But when I look at how much the podcast benefits from getting out there, from speaking to people, from researching and practicing new concepts, it provides me with so much inspiration to write, so much inspiration to record and to approach guests, and then to drag out the questions from them. that people would find useful. And if you don't know much about much, then asking the right questions is also really hard, and it won't be as valuable a podcast or an interview. So, with all that said, that's why I advocate balance, because it does help me to satisfy my curiosity, to deliver what I need to deliver, and also see those people that I really need to see on a weekly basis.
That's awesome. Well, you're staying inspired is keeping us inspired. So whatever you're doing, just keep doing it.
Until I run out of steam, hopefully never.
Right. So what's one thing, because we don't have a ton of time, but what's one thing that stood out to you in the interview? Something you've learned that just like woke you up, or was an aha moment, something you didn't see coming?
Oh, well, what I could do is go back through the interviews and create a montage of all the little wonderful things that have been said. And they are present in the blog posts, usually in little kind of quote marks, right? And the way my memory works is the most recent stuff is more memorable than the old stuff, right? So there's been plenty of things, but I imagine as many podcasts go by, the approach to me that was the most interesting, I'm not going to say valuable, because what everyone brings is valuable, but the approach of Feldenkrais for me, if for someone who's curious about what the heck is going on, all you have to do is go and watch someone do Feldenkrais, and you'll be about 100 times more curious, because you'll have no idea what's happening. So Robert Susuma's podcast for me was the most recent, but I got him on, or we got him on, because I'd been reading about Feldenkrais and been taking in a lot of the awareness through movement exercises and the literature, and it intrigued me so much. And I remember even being on a sun lounger in Greece in April, I think it was, and I'm there doing Feldenkrais exercises. There's a pool, and there's people around the pool, and I'm just kind of opening my jaw, twisting my head, and raising my shoulder like this, and I'll go the other way, right? And I just know these people are kind of going, what the heck is that guy doing? Such weird dancing. He needs to lay off the margaritas, because I was pretty much having like 3 margaritas every day since what I do on holiday. So for me, and then listening to Robert talk about it, and the kind of chaos that kind of training can bring. Off the back of that chaos can bring learning. It can scramble habits. It can do lots of things for us if we use it in the right way. And then working on some of the awareness through movement exercises that have been Feldenkrais derived. I think that particular approach for me, it slots into what I've done in the past, and it complements my history and my knowledge in a way that I'm just very thankful for. So the more I can take in about that approach and about that history, that's what I'm doing most at the moment.
That's great. I hope people hear you say that, because I have a couple of friends I don't know much about it myself, but I have a couple of friends who's really changed their lives. So that's another frontier to get into. Right now I'm into kettlebells and weight training. So
cool.
Next.
Yeah, we only have enough time, don't we? Kind of like, I want to do everything, and that would all cost like $100,000, and I just don't have the hours either. So as it comes.
Yes, exactly. So one of the reasons I want to do this series is because I want people to understand that voice science and vocology is actually a thing, right? So I use the word vocology as much as I can just to get it out there and to share it with people. I'm assuming you and I have a mutual love for voice science. Obviously, it's an important part of the picture, but how has voice science functioned in your career?
Well, initially it made me go boggle-eyed. I think I was talking on another interview about when I first saw Ingo Titze talk. I was excited because I was also feeling the buzz around me as well from the people who knew way more about him. And he was my introduction, and actually backing track for that, John Henney, who's a voice teacher in LA, he'd spoken about him before and was using concepts of formant tuning. So I already felt from John some passion, and some of the stuff he was talking about was interesting. Then I went to that talk with Ingo, and then he started writing a subscript N. And that's when I was at the front, and I was like, oh no, this has turned into the worst class ever, because he's written a subscript N. I don't even know what that means. All I know what it means is I'm leaving. Right? Because at school I was not a maths person. Algebra, I was just so terrible. But I was a biology person, and I was self-proclaimed great at biology, but I got really good grades and all that stuff. So in there, as much as that maths at school didn't relate to anything I could really latch onto as real world. I know it does, by the way, but then I couldn't even see it. But nowadays, if you can equate algebra to biology and how the body functions, suddenly I'm interested. Suddenly it's got, because then it translates to singing, and I'm like, well, hello, this is really cool. So it took me a while to realize that. And the more I got into working and watching Ingo talk, and then his daughter Karen, and then getting into the literature, the vocology literature that's out there, then moving on into the formant tuning sort of scenario, which was very interesting. And as soon as you start messing around with that, you just start to calculate harmonic placement, where they are in the series, and where you could find a formant that's going to suitably match to that. And then you take that on as a principle. You may end up with a mad vowel. Who knows, right? At the end of the day, you're just lining up formants. Who cares what the word is?
Right.
But
Michael Jackson knew.
Yeah, he got away with it.
Yeah.
And so when you hear a voice change in the way that it does when harmonic energy is actually exploited, that is another kind of like, oh whoa, this is really cool. I just need to make sure they don't sound like this. They have to sound like they're saying the right word now. That's the other trick. And so then you start playing around with the parameters of lips, tongue, which is so useful. So when I got into formant tuning and actually just tone on its own and how the lips and tongue affect that, that became a whole nother world of like articulation and research, and how valuable is that? It's amazingly valuable. Then it's what the throat and the larynx and how they behave, and epilarynx and twang and all those things that can change the game back there. When you start messing around with those concepts as well, you start to formulate different ideas. And I think in the end, voice science ultimately has allowed me to assimilate information into my pedagogical practice much more effectively than if someone said, hey, try this exercise with no other information. So here's a great exercise, no other information. Back in the day, I would have done it to the singer too high, or too low, or too loud, or too soft, or a scenario that did not suit that exercise. But if I knew the scenario that suited that exercise, maybe I would find the amazing fruit in it. And I find voice science helps us to assimilate good information, sometimes information that's 300 years old, right, from classical pedagogy or traditional, and bring it into a contemporary environment, but knowing voice science, anatomy, acoustics, it can bring it into the modern singing world. And that's what I'm most concerned about, is how can I customize the incredible information that's already been and gone for the last few hundred years. How can I customize that for today?
Yeah.
Because you can invent a load of different exercises, but I think when you look back, someone's always done it already. Right. It's just, there's very little that's new. It's just like either it's structured differently, or the pathway is different, or and then with enough scientific knowledge, I think you can make it work for the world that you're in.
Yeah, that's why we all need each other.
Yeah.
And speaking of needing each other, do you know who Justin Peterson is by any chance?
Yeah, I have read his blog a few times.
Yeah, he's a genius with bringing old pedagogy and old pedagogical writings to the modern age. So I'm just throwing that out there. I would love for you guys to meet someday, because I think you would have a load to talk about.
I mean, that would be a very interesting thing to do, because obviously there'd be the classical contemporary divide.
Yeah.
And how passionate someone might be about that might lead them to throw away what's pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, that's a classical technique that's not going to work. And you know what? There probably will be many things from classical that aren't going to work.
Right.
There'd be loads that would work as they are, like literally plug and play into contemporary. Or, now hang on, this has a lot in it, but it's going to need to be slightly customized. Otherwise, it's going to take a singer sounding irrelevant. So yeah, I think yeah, if we don't go back through history and see what we can do with it, as contemporary teachers, we probably are just spending a lot of time and effort for something that's already been figured out.
Yeah, and aren't we talking about the same thing in the end anyway? Like, how do you make different sounds? How does a voice make all the range of sounds? Like, just the other day, a student said, so a more resonant, clear tone is better than a breathy tone. And I said, no. That's not the point. The point is you could be able to do both. But if you can only do one and not the other, there's, like you said earlier, there's no good or bad. It's like, how do you make all the sounds?
Yeah. And how extreme is that sound in terms of vocal function?
Yeah.
And rather, we don't use that language with the students so much, but kind of simplify it somewhat. But as voice teachers, if we kind of understand, if someone's going to say be breathy a lot of the time, that is living in an extreme. And one of the kind of vocology principles would kind of, to quote it, would be to live in an extreme for too long is going to cause trouble muscularly and efficiency and all those kind of things. So we're just trying to have our students understand, here's your preferred sound, but here's what you're going to need to do to offset that issue of potential fatigue, for example. Like, it'd be great if you didn't talk breathy all day too, because that's probably going to get something that you might find you get tired or dry or whatnot. So I think as a contemporary coach, where there's so many more colors on the table in terms of voice tone and voice use, I think we have to get a bit more strategic about how someone is going to realistically and sustainably use certain sounds, and how they warm down from that, how they reset when they've
thank you.
in an extreme, So I think that's why I think CCM, or contemporary music, and being a coach in that, it's quite a valuable aspect of knowing what a rebalancing means for someone.
Yes, amen to that. Now, you said two words here. You've talked teacher and coach. And one of the things I noticed on your website is that you are a vocal coach and also a singing teacher, correct?
Yeah.
Why do you have both of those on your website like that?
Well, I can't remember if it was this video or the last video, but I had a video on my website saying they are different. But for singing teaching, that is showing someone how to sing who might not necessarily know how, which is admittedly less of my market these days, because my market has shifted towards professionals. So where I become a coach often, I become that person. I'm not showing you how to sing this song. I'm not showing you what might be cool or interesting, because it's already that. What I'm trying to do is provide you with activities, exercises, changing the scenario on you, so that we can solidify how good you are at delivering that consistently every day, because that's their job. They have to get good at being consistent. So I feel like a coach is someone who can bring in slight adjustments, little bits of chaos, in order to solidify the sort of the learned thing that they're trying to do. So I very much enjoy that, because of the panic that you get. So I tell you, why don't we do this a whole key up, or even a whole key down? And they're like, it's like, I'm so confused, it doesn't feel the same. I'm like, that's fine. Now let's do that whilst you're physically distracted. Maybe you're actually going to dance, because you're going to dance in the show. Maybe we're going to start that from the middle. Maybe we're going to do that at, if they're looking for creativity, let's then change that from 4/4 to 6/8 and just see what happens. So I'm not really showing them what to do. I'm just changing the environment constantly. And then occasionally, maybe it's like, okay, I have to put singing teacher hat on now, because sometimes the pro singer comes in and goes, I've got something given to me. I don't know actually even how to do this one. It's a different world. So I turn into the singing teacher. But the singing teacher part of it is also really enjoyable, because when singers have let's say very little stylistic identity, they know what music they like to listen to, and they don't know how to use their voice in a way that's going to make them feel like they sound as they want to sound, and they're in tune, all the the 101 parts of singing a song. Yeah. But showing them how to analyze other singers, and then asking them to bring that into their own voices, and then them go, oh my God, I'm really good at R&B. I'm really good. Or actually, I've been soaking this up for ages, but my voice just would not let me exploit what I've been hearing and absorbing. Yeah. And that's when it's not like you give someone a riff, they sing it, and it's like, you're definitely an R&B singer. There's always been some backstory of like, well, yeah, I listened to Usher for 5 years on repeat. So yeah, I feel like the singing teacher side of it and the vocal coach side of it, they both have their different aspects, but also their different fruits and their different outcomes. That's why I teach. I just love the outcomes too.
Yeah, I love that too, being able to delineate certain things so you can kind of know which mode you're in while you're doing your job, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that brings me to my last question. Where do you see the future of voice pedagogy heading? What's the future voice teacher going to look like? Because I think it might be different than what we've had in the past.
Yeah.
That's just an idea.
Yeah, no, I think it is going. I think it's always shifting, and I think we can respond to what we see now. There's an element of the BS meter running as well, because sometimes there's fad stuff, which might seem really big but don't necessarily shape the course of history. And then there's other things that seem quite modest, but really in the background are constantly changing the way people think. And I feel like the holistic side of singing, and the myriad of connections to the larynx, for example, and to the rib cage, and how much I've learned in the past 5 years of how much someone's hip rotation corresponds to problems in the neck, which when I first started, I'm like, no, I can't believe this. But to be a fully functioning voice coach and singing teacher, and as a voice coach, if I'm with professional singers, my main job is to serve them. And I often need to serve them in times when they are not happy, not fit, not healthy, but are under pressure. And I don't want to send anybody out on stage who's literally can't do the job. But what I've found is, in these times where things seem to be kaput, you unravel a voice muscularly, physically, and then you expose what's underneath, which before sounded like ruptured blood vessels or something. And then you realize it's literally just a stomach that isn't working, a stomach that is just like a rock solid wall, and the chest is knackered because it's been breathing all night for singing. Oh, wow. And then you just kind of go, oh my God, I was about to refer you for surgery. and then you mess around physically, and it comes out fine, and the singer is just like, occasionally in tears, or something. So if pedagogy for for the professional voice and the athletic singer, if it doesn't go enough towards the holistic, the osteopathic approaches and the mechanisms at which people might achieve the same thing, the same pitch, the same sound, it can all be achieved in different ways. Like we say, not all of it is wrong. Some of it might be a bit edgy, going to cause damage, but many people use different strategies and are fine. But holistically, we just need to understand what might get overworked in that scenario in the body, and how can we make sure that someone isn't just over time in that way of singing, isn't accidentally coupling problems together, which then become very hardcore habitual patterns, like a lot of chest cramping to get big notes or something like that. So yeah, I think as well as keeping people physically fit, I think those physical and holistic approaches allow us to notice the couplings that are within the voice and the body. And then we can just constantly structure someone's brain and body and warm up to always consider how those couplings could happen, and just make sure that they are decoupled. And then at times you let them couple, like certain things, you let them couple for sounds, but just not habitually. So yeah, that's where I feel in the forums I see people talking about that more. And in my own practice, I see the benefit of that hugely. So that's where I think pedagogy hopefully is headed.
That's brilliant. Thank you for saying all that.
No worries. I mean, it's been a voyage of discovery for me, and I'm sure there's so many people out there who are able to elaborate on that better than I can. But you know, it's and I'm only scratching the surface. But what I've seen under that little scratch is just incredibly valuable.
Because there's so much to learn. It just never ends, does it?
Yeah, which can be disconcerting, right?
Oh, it's terrifying.
For some people, it might be like, oh my God, will I never be good at this? It's like, yeah, I think that's half the fun though, isn't it? To uncover millions of different things.
Well, one of my voice teachers said, you know, the first 12 years of teaching, you do stuff, and the next 12 you try to figure out what you did in the first 12, basically, you know. So, you know, that's what it feels like to me.
24 years.
Oh no.
I'll be dead by then, probably.
And I hope not. All right, so I have one extra question. So when I learned about the straw, in 2012 from Ingo Titze, and then 4 years later, I had an epiphany. Like, I had someone use a straw in front of a group of people, and her voice changed so dramatically. It was such a shift. That was the moment when I had my straw epiphany and realized that this was such a powerful tool. I knew it was good, and I used it some, but I didn't have that moment where I woke up and said, oh my gosh, the straw is amazing.
Yeah, right.
Did you have a straw epiphany, or was it just always amazing to you from the first time you used it?
Yeah, the epiphany for me was the first time I used it.
Okay.
Because clearly something in my voice was responding well to that environment, or had been polar to that environment in the past, right? So when there's such a distinct change like that, it's very hard to not go, okay, this is flipping great, and my gig this evening was so good. So that became a kind of part and parcel of why I researched voice science, because of that epiphany.
Yeah.
So naturally, I brought it into how I worked with singers all over, and then got used to, you know, then you start to expand on, like, hey, who needs what size straw, for example, because that's quite important. And what happens if there's no voice at the top? What does that mean? Because that happens a lot when someone straws up to the top and suddenly it cuts off. It sounds really bad, but it's not bad. It's just too much oral pressure pushing the chords apart, right? So it's like, okay, no worries. Or there's an intrinsic lack of, you know, contact with the vocal folds anyway, so they just don't deal with back pressure that well. So there's been a few times like that, but an anti-epiphany, I'll have to tell you, I don't know what you call the opposite of an epiphany.
We'll go with anti-epiphany.
Yeah, anti-epiphany was as as amazing as the straw has been for so many people, one time that sticks out with me about the straw was the time that it changed someone's voice so much that they lost it, freaked out. And this was a singer who was kind of like major label as well. So like it was a weird moment for me and a weird moment for them. And eventually the manager, because the thing is that they hadn't been singing for quite a while, and then they just kind of landed this tour, and it was a very out of the blue. So it was a kind of like, I wasn't expecting this, but I'm going to be going on tour. So, and I was like, of course, I know what will get you back in shape real quickly, and what will take the load off your mind without having to think about technique as much in the intro. So then the smallest amount of straw work, because it's 5 minutes after all, right? It's not going to take longer than that.
Right.
Once, maybe twice a day. And then I had a phone call from her manager kind of saying, yeah, she's not going to come in tomorrow. In fact, she's never going to come back in. So for me, obviously that was not funny at the time. I was like, oh my God, this is really bad. But the thing about that was that voice clearly needed to be moving in that direction. It was in dire need of exercise. And I think she might have felt that after 3 weeks, after 4 weeks, after 5 weeks.
Yeah.
But it's easier to deal with in 5 weeks' time, across 5 weeks. But to have all that change to where you want to be in one day is where you kind of go, I don't even know how to sing anymore. I have no idea. I have no orientation around this instrument. This sensation is alien. And what's coming out, my ears go, never heard that before, right? So,
right.
So I actually, from that moment on, that was about 5 years ago or something, 4 years ago. And from that point on, I've been careful with voices, because if you're a beginner and you do that, your voice is, let's say your voice isn't that well exercised and it changes that much, you can coach a beginner like psychologically through that process, and they don't have to get on stage, but not a professional. So I think when you go into using straws like that on voices that haven't been out for a while, for years, I think that's where you kind of play it more safe. Because it's so good that it was so bad. That's kind of how it worked out for me. So I think that's, and I don't want to put anybody off using a straw, because it's still an amazing tool in my studio. But that's one of the scenarios that sticks out for me.
Well, you're speaking to an issue that I've actually talked to 2 or 3 people about in the last couple days, which is weird. And it's the issue of learning new sounds in the body. But when your brain doesn't have a map for that sound, it could be the most healthy, efficient, easy, wonderful sound ever, right? One that you could sing on for 5 hours a night.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a map for it, you just kind of freak out a little bit. And that's a really hard part of our job is getting more efficient sound, and also dealing with that psychological aspect when you have no map. Your mind is like, we're in the dark room and there's no switch and I don't know what to do with this, So
yeah.
I'm really glad you brought it up, because I think that's just so huge in our jobs.
You can imagine the reaction. The reaction from the coach might be, that sounds phenomenal.
Right.
Like amazing. And the singer is going, that sounds insane. Like I can't even buy into what you're saying right now. And it doesn't matter how much, honestly, this is the way to go. It doesn't matter how much you would say that. There is no buy-in, because they're in shock. Yeah. And you can't speak to somebody in shock.
Oh,
it's really difficult. Yeah. So it's like, oh my God, yeah, it's a very strange situation to find myself in. I think it's probably the strangest situation I've found myself in over these years. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't think she really was prepared or had a map for what was about to happen.
Yeah. Wow. What a great place to end this interview too. So thank you very much for taking all this time to talk with me. And in the future, if I have more and better questions, would you be interested in talking again sometime?
Absolutely.
It's really great because I've really enjoyed this, and I feel like I've met a kindred spirit. So,
Same. Yeah, same. And thank you for having me on. Thank you for providing such a great resource. previous guest list is exemplary. So what you've done here is really cool. So I'm just super honored to be on your hit list.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been really fun, and I look forward to chatting at some point in the near future. So
yeah, let's do that.
All right, very good. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
All right, bye.